Happy Fire Drill Fridays, everybody. I appreciate your joining me. If you're with us for the first time or the 50th time, welcome to Fire Drill Fridays, where we're building community, learning about the climate crisis, and taking action to address it. Visit firedrillfridays.com/take action to find out more. And please drop your name and where you're joining from in the comments, because I really love hearing from you. So today, we're talking about hot labor summer, the surge in labor fights and wins that's been taking the world by storm, and specifically, some of the ways workers and environmentalists are coming together to win against big corporations. But first, some good news without the xylophone, because I'm on the road. I'm so proud to celebrate the Global Oceans Treaty. It's been agreed on and it's moving forward. I was there in New York with dozens of government leaders from all over the world as they declared their support and marched off to the UN building to sign it right then and there. More than 90 governments have now signed the treaty, and I'm happy to say the United States was among the first signers. Bravo to all of us for pushing our leaders to get here. Next up, ratification, and then most importantly, putting it to work, protecting 30% of the oceans by 2030. Also in New York, just days before, was the March to End Fossil Fuels, where 75,000 people took to the streets and 600,000 joined in demonstrations worldwide. It was the largest mobilization to demand the end of fossil fuels and was featured on the front page of the New York Times, as well as dozens of other major media outlets around the world. Just as world leaders converged for the United Nations Climate Action Summit. President Biden is feeling the pressure for his terrible track record on fossil fuels from all sides. And climate movement, UN leadership, global media, he needs pressure. And all I can say is we have to keep it up. Meanwhile, California Gavin Newsom, I'm so excited to say his name, and I can't even believe I'm feeling this way because I've fought against him for so long. But Gavin Newsom and his attorney general are suing the 5 biggest oil companies in the world for their decades of lies and deceits. The lawsuit holds these companies responsible for billions in climate fuel destruction and calls on them to create a recovery fund for extreme weather events and fires. I applaud Governor Newsom for taking on big oil, finally, and making polluters pay for their damage. Speaking of taking on big corporations, let's get to our main topic. Hot labor summer. What is it? How is it shaping politics? And what are the connections to the climate movement? There's been an incredible uptick this season, as you know, in workers organizing for better pay, their rights, and a brighter future. And they're not just fighting more, they're winning more, which inspires even more action. Because, here's the thing, when workers see other workers fight back and win, it creates a massive ripple effect. That's hot labor summer in a nutshell. Workers are winning organizing campaigns at previously unthinkable companies like Starbucks, Apple, and Amazon. In 2023 alone, more than 350,000 workers in the US walked off the job to demand better pay and conditions. That includes 170,000 Hollywood, 170,000 of us, that's right. 170,000 Hollywood actors and screenwriters have been on strike for months, and you can bet I've been out there on the picket line many times. I was on the picket line with one of our guests who's about to come on. In a major breakthrough last week, the Writers Guild of America reached a tentative agreement for their new contract. About time. What's interesting, as a climate activist and a union supporter, is to notice the ways that labor uprisings are becoming more and more linked to the surging climate crisis. In July, 340,000 UPS employees declared their intention to strike, and in doing so, negotiated one of the strongest contracts in UPS history. including wage increases and extreme heat protection. Think about it. Yeah, they demanded and deserved better pay, but during the hottest months, summer on record, a top demand was also air conditioning and fans for their sweltering trucks, which thankfully they won. But believe me, heat protection for New Yorkers is a major concern across industries that will only grow. In California, fast food workers won a major battle to increase their minimum wage to $20 an hour, gain power in shaping their working conditions. Now, that may seem unrelated to climate, but their win was bolstered by a law that SEIU California was able to get past it because he united with environmental groups. Solidarity gives us strength. That law, AB, that means Assembly Bill 421, was aiming at curbing corporate abuse in California politics and was critical in bringing fast food giants back to the negotiating table. It's also important for communities living near oil wells, as we will discuss later in the show. And just a few weeks ago, tens of thousands of United Auto Workers went on strike, as you know, demanding higher wages, better benefits, and, wait for it, an agreement to ensure they won't be left behind as the industry transitions to electric vehicles. The strike has spread to dozens of locations, and President Biden, I'm sure you read about this, even joined their picket line last week. It's the first time a sitting U.S. president has ever joined a picket line with union workers on strike. This is momentum. Yeah. The UAW fight is at the heart of what it means to transition away from fossil fuels while putting workers first. Auto workers need to know that there will be safe, good-paying union jobs as we move to electric vehicles across the entire supply chain. In a rapidly changing world where climate change is hitting home in devastating ways, with people of color and low-income communities hit first and worst, we can only expect that the intersections between climate and labor issues will grow. How we will respond will make all the difference in the world as to whether we build the power we need to win real economic, racial, and climate justice, or if we let wealthy interests divide us and pit us against one another. What's heartening is to see the climate movement beginning to step up in solidarity with these brave workers. When tens of thousands of auto workers walked out, Greenpeace USA joined with the Labor Network for Sustainability and 350.org to co-author a letter of support, which was signed by more than 130 organizations and was featured in a full-page ad in the Detroit Free Press. Greenpeace welcomed UAW workers and media aboard the renowned Greenpeace Arctic Sunrise ship with huge banners displayed in solidarity. And now they are working with climate allies to mobilize people to join the picket line. And that's just a start. I believe the success of the climate movement, quite literally, may depend on our ability to show that a clean, green economy means good-paying union jobs. What happens in the auto workers' fight will be a bellwether and a powerful message about what the transition to clean energy means for workers. If we get this right, we unlock massive potential to build unity and power for that world we all deserve. That's why the auto workers' strike is and must be a climate strike too. So if there's a UAW picket near you, please join it. As I'm traveling the country on a speaking tour, I always look to see if there's a picket line nearby, and I will be going. I love to walk picket lines with workers. And without further ado, let's welcome our first guest. Michelle Collins is a UAW Local 977 Skilled Trades Delegate, currently working at the General Motors stamping facility in Marion, Indiana. And she's been employed for more than 20 years, and she's also a single mother of 3 and a grandmother of 6. Thanks so much for taking a moment to speak with us, Michelle. I know that every single second counts for this strike and that, you're really busy. So I really appreciate your being here.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate being here myself.
Tell us, Michelle, from your perspective, what are you and your fellow auto workers fighting for in this contract? Why is this strike so important?
Well, what we are fighting for is our fair share. We sacrificed the economic downturn during the economic downturn in 2007. Yeah. We gave concessions so that these big corporations could stay afloat. As President Fain said, the deal was UAW members take some short-term cuts for the long-term survival of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. As things started to turn around, the company started profiting in 2012, and the corporations continued making profits from that point on. The strike is so significant because we were left behind. We were never made whole from our concessionary sacrifices, nor have we even been able to keep up with inflation. The corporations have made $250 billion in the last 10 years, and we just simply want our fair share. We can't even afford to buy the vehicles, the trucks that we build. It's just out of reach, especially for the lower tier workers that we have.
Yeah, it's kind of paycheck to paycheck, right?
Yes, paycheck to paycheck for many of us. Without overtime, they force us to work overtime, and a lot of people, they have to work overtime in order to make ends meet, because that just proves that we're not making enough money per hour.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So many of us who care about a livable climate and are trying to reduce fossil fuel use, including advocating for more electric cars, buses, and charging stations. Michelle, why do you think the climate movement should support a better union contract for the auto workers who manufacture those cars? In other words, why should the UAW's fight be our fight too?
Well, so many of us care about our planet. We too believe global warming is a real issue. We also believe lowering vehicle emissions and the carbon footprint is very important. The Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, was signaled into law to support clean energy, and at the same time was supposed to create good paying jobs and help build our communities. The IRA is giving auto companies billions of taxpayer dollars with no strings attached to support this transition. We are behind this, yet it must be a just transition. The future of the auto worker jobs should not be sacrificed or left behind. Strong union contracts protecting our members during the rapid growing EV electric vehicle transitions are critical. Our contracts are not only about our wages, they also create the framework for health and safety standards that protect our workers, their families, and the environment. We are fighting to put working people, climate change, and human rights before profits. We hope everyone that has these same beliefs will join us in solidarity for better union contracts.
You bet we will. Thank you. What can our viewers do specifically to support UAW auto workers as the strike continues?
Well, I'm glad you asked. We ask that you join our picket lines, as you mentioned, participate in the support rallies that we hold, acknowledge striking members, simply drive by and honk at a picket line. If you don't have time to stop and join us, you can honk. That gives us moral support. It lets us know that you stand behind us. Wear red shirts on Wednesdays. We do this in solidarity. You can also visit uaw.org and click on the Stand With Us link, and that will kind of guide you a little further as well, give you some other ideas. Thanks for asking.
We will follow through on that, Michelle. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And you tell your co-workers that are out on the picket line that climate activists and environmentalists are standing with them in solidarity wholeheartedly, and really appreciate you being here.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Firefighters, you can also go to firedrillfriday.com/take action to get all the info on how to join a picket line, distribute flyers at a dealership. That's another thing you can do, or sign the petition to stand with UAW workers. Let's make sure that Michelle and every UAW worker out there taking risks for a better future, that they really feel our support. It's important. Next up, we're going to talk about California, how workers and environmentalists have secured some incredible victories this last year, and how their seemingly separate fights came together for a big win. As we've discussed on the show before, last year, California workers and communities won big when Senate Bill 1137 passed. That's a bill that would have stopped harmful drilling in neighborhoods, next to schools and playgrounds and churches. At the same time, California workers passed a breakthrough bill, AB, Assembly Bill 257, that would give California fast food workers the power to raise their wages and improve working conditions. Now, as you can imagine, big corporations didn't like either of those wins. Fast food giants and big oil corporations each poured millions of dollars into collecting signatures to get ballot measures to overturn these bills. And that's when historically unlikely allies came together. Labor and environmental groups fought back against corporate abuse of Californians' referendum process to put democracy back in the hands of the people. We'll hear more about that and the fast food worker victory that followed from our next guest, Service Employee International Union, SEIU California President, David Huerta. Oh, but before we do, let's watch a very short, inspiring video on fast food workers. Big win.
It's an honor to stand with such courageous, tenacious, inspiring fast food workers who fought for this moment for years on the streets, at work, and in the legislature.
To be able to come to Sacramento, take time off of a job that they were already being harassed on, to come to Sacramento to let their voices be heard for change. But what you have done is set in motion something that's going to reverberate around the entire country. As the story of the labor movement continues to be written, this day, this moment, this bill will be remembered throughout history.
California is showing us what true international leadership looks like. Governor Newsom and the legislators made history today by establishing the first in the nation fast food council, where workers are finally going to have a say in their wages, hours, and working conditions. 500,000 workers getting raises to $20 an hour in April of 2024.
With the help and the support of so many people, we are here today to make history.
Because we're not just about growth. This state's about inclusion. And that's the foundational principle we're advancing here today. What a gift that I get to pull this out. And I get to.
Incredible, right? Now let's meet one of the many heroes behind that effort, David Huerta. Hi, David. I haven't seen you since we were together on the SAG after picket line. David, for those of you who might not know, David is the president of SEIU United Service Workers West, which represents more than 45,000 janitors, security officers, airport service workers, and other property service workers all across California. David is a well-known labor leader dedicated to securing justice and inclusion for immigrant workers and their families, creating paths to power and union membership, and strengthening networks for economic, social, immigrant, and environmental justice. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jane, for having me. It's great seeing you again.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed our day on the picket line last month, so it's great.
David, can you tell us more about SEIU California, your local USWW? What kind of workers do you represent? Where do they live and what's important to them?
Sure. Well, SEIU, SWW, well, SEIU in general, we're over 700,000 workers in California. And I'm also have the honor to be the SEIU California president. So that's a great honor to have. But also my organization, USWW, represent janitors, security officers, airport workers, stadium and arena workers, up and down the state from San Diego to Sacramento. And these are Black, brown people. These are immigrant workers across difference. And these are workers who work, as I say, workers who work in low-wage industries. But the reality is that they work in these industries that are in commercial real estate, on our airports. These are multi-billion-dollar companies that they service, but yet they work in low-wage industries or make low wages. And so our work is to really raise the standard for those workers and continue to fight for them and make those jobs good jobs so they can support themselves and their families. And right now, we're seeing the issues of the environment, the environment that they have to live in, a lot of the toxic pollution they have to deal with, and also the issue of housing. Housing is such an issue in California, and it's so hard for them to be able to afford. And that's an issue for all working people in California up and down the state.
Let's talk about victories. I feel like we don't tell enough victory stories, to celebrate progress and to learn lessons from what really is working. So tell me more about the fight for fast food workers over the past decade and big win last month.
Yeah, huge win. We're so proud of the work that our fast food workers have been able to do. I mean, they started this fight, if you recall, about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. They started the fight for 15. They were the ones who initiated the fight. They're the ones who said, we've had enough. Workers need to have a better wage. And the fast food workers were the tip of the spear in that fight for 15. And you saw what they were able to achieve in making that demand for 15. Cities and states across the country, through the work that they did, moved wages up for working people. And they were fighting constantly. But part of what we weren't able to achieve was the other part of what we always said was a fight for 15 and a union. And I want to repeat that. It's a fight for 15 and a union when we started this fight. And so, just recently, as you said, on AB 1228, we were able to win for the first time ever anywhere in the country, basically an industry committee or an industry board that consists of workers, consists of the franchisees, consists of state agency, to be able to negotiate standards for these workers in the workplace, as well as wage standards for these workers. And starting as of April 1st, 2024, these workers are going to start to make $20 an hour. And for between now and in 2020, from now to 2029, we will be able to continue on that wage board, improve the conditions for those workers in the workplace who have been victims of wage theft, sexual harassment, workplace health and safety issues, address those issues, and at the same time continue to negotiate those wages, because these workers work in multi-billion-dollar corporations, but yet they don't see a dime of those profits. And so through this legislation, they're now going to have a place at the table, a seat at the table.
Oh, great. I'm so inspired. Big congratulations, David, on a hard fought win. It's so great. Now let's talk about a victory that we worked on together in California to pass Assembly Bill 421, a bill to fix the referendum process. Why was that such a big deal for both in what was passed and in how we worked together to get it done?
Yeah, well, that was our great leader, Mary Kay Henry, said that this fight for 1228 was kind of like playing three-dimensional chess. There was so many moving parts to hold the corporations accountable and to ensure that workers' voices were being heard. And a lot of that fight was in the legislature to move, because what people don't know about the labor movement right now is there's a lot of workers that are excluded from being able to join unions, right? At a moment in time where union approval is upwards of 70%, a lot of those people who approve of unions aren't able to join a union because of classification or being misclassified owner-operator, independent contract, franchisee employees. And so, we crafted, when we passed 257, as you mentioned earlier, right away, we got it passed. The governor signed it. And the very next day, what did they do? They started collecting signatures against us. Spent $10 million to collect signatures to be able to stop what our state legislature did through our vote to improve the lives of over 500,000 workers. And so what we ended up doing is coming back to the fight and playing three-dimensional chess through the power of working people and through the power of these fast food workers who tremendous amounts, over 400 strikes in the state of California alone just to move this forward. And and one of the key pieces was not only making sure we won on the issue of industry bargaining, but that they can no longer use the referendum process against the advances of the working people. And so what 421 does three things. One, it clarifies the language in the ballot process. So when you get your ballot and it talks about what you're voting on, it's supposed to be clear, concise language that we all understand. If you all remember AB 22, ballot measure 22, back in 2020, I believe it was, we didn't know what we were voting on. We didn't know if a yes vote meant that we supported the Lyft Uber drivers, or if a no vote meant that we were supporting them. We were confused. I was confused. The governor was confused. So one, the language has to be clear. Two, it also has to clarify who's in support and who's against it. And it also who's funding this.
Funding it, yeah, the top three funders.
The top three funders, because a lot of times they hide behind the people for democracy, but they don't tell you who the people for democracy are. Yeah. And so this makes sure that the top three funders has to be identified. So if the corporations are involved, that who's fighting this is the corporations in their own self-interest and not in the interest of those workers. And third, and most importantly, is just a clear yes or no question. Yes, do you support the legislation? Or no, I reject the legislation. So people like yourself and I who go to the ballot box to submit our vote can speak with clarity as to what our intention is and not be in this ambiguous gray understanding of, is my yes vote supporting workers or is my no vote supporting them, or and it was so confusing with Prop 22 that we basically lost that measure, outspent 20-1 at the same time, but lost it because of the confusion at the ballot box.
Right. Yeah, there was a lot of celebrating when you passed those, especially AB 421. What was interesting to realize was that many of the same workers who are being exploited by the fast food giants are also living in communities impacted by toxic oil and gas drilling. It became very clear that corporate greed is hammering the same people from all sides. It's just different faces of the same villain. And knowing that, how can we continue building strength and unity to push back against greedy corporations who put profits on people over people and the planet? And how can we build bridges between the movements for workers' rights and environmental justice? And,
in all honesty, I think we're talking about one and the same thing. And right. That's what we have to realize is, protecting our planet, protecting our Mother Earth, protecting our communities is hand in hand with treating our workers with dignity and respect. When workers are treated with dignity and respect, and they live in safe, sound communities, and when I say safe and sound, I'm talking about environmental standards, that so their children don't grow up with asthma, or they're not growing up with getting ill from the environment they live in. That's where we could come together and join together. Right now, I was really proud last week, we joined over 30 environmental groups calling out the airline industry because the airline industry doesn't report low carbon emission standards. We have a standard in California that says, we're doing away with carbon emission cars. We're transitioning to a green economy, but we're not putting that same pressure on airline industry. And the airline industry, and if you look just not too far from south of us, but here in LAX, it's one of the biggest polluters in California. If you live in the runway of those airlines, you're breathing all that toxic air that comes from the emissions of those airlines. But yet that does not get reported neither at the state level nor at the federal level because they're exempted from reporting. And on top of that, they get fuel tax subsidies in the state of California, in Washington, in Illinois, in New York, to be able to get subsidize the taxes that they should be paying on the fuel they're using. So that money continues to go to their profits and continues to dirty communities. And not only that, those workers that they're keeping workers in substandard conditions in the sense of not only to their health, but also to their conditions and wages. And so I really think it's an opportunity. What we demonstrated last week at the steps of state capitol is that environmental workers, environmental organizations, and worker organizations can work together to improve the conditions for all of us, both environmentally and raise standards for working people.
Yeah. You know what the oil companies call those communities where they have all their drilling where people are dying? They call them sacrifice zones.
Yeah.
Some of your workers live in sacrifice zones.
Yeah, and that's so true. And you know, I don't know if you remember a few years back when that fuel dump happened with the airlines. The airline that was passing over and landing in Los Angeles dropped fuel on a schoolyard where children were playing.
Yeah, it's just
awful.
Yeah, and all the kids that live, almost 3 million Californians live in sacrifice zones right now. And, right. We got the governor to sign that bill that created a setback to put an end to that. And now they're trying to overturn it. I'm going to be working all next year with you, I hope, and other unions to not allow the oil companies to do this, right? What is, David, what is something that you wish the average climate activist or environmentalist understood better about the workers' movement and the unions that represent them?
Well, I think I would say is that really that our movement, and many times what gets addressed is where the conflicts exist between where the environmental movement is at and where parts of the labor movement is at. And I'll tell you, I think, it's really sometimes we focus on what our differences versus where we stand together. And I think, it's taken a while for labor to continue to learn that transitioning from a dirty fuel, fossil fuel is going to take time, but it's necessary to protect our communities and our environment. And we're coming to those transitions now. And I think that's starting to happen. And I think on the environmental side, how can they help not only making the environmental demand, but as making that environmental demand to know that those people who are working, who are in labor, also need to have the standards of a better quality of life. That includes environmental standards, that includes healthcare, that includes housing, that includes everything that one would help, everything that one would expect with the labor that one puts into it. And how do we bring those two pieces together to make this a win-win situation for all of us? And I think that's what's really critical. It's not an either or, it has to be an and. And how do we join together in the and?
Yeah. Somebody yesterday told me how much an auto worker, a unionized auto worker, makes compared to what an electric vehicle worker makes right now. Do you know what is the difference? It's huge.
Well, I just heard a report this morning that one of the most shocking things that I heard, and I hope you could inform me on that one, but I heard that the average auto worker would have to work 400 years just to be paid what a CEO makes in 1 year.
Yeah.
So let's who's really, we need to make sure that we are lifting all boats. And for too long, those at the top have had the ability to be able, through their greed, do as they wish, drill oil near schools, churches, in our communities. And it comes at the cost of who? Working people.
Right. That's right. David, what are your favorite organizing lessons for those of us seeking to make change?
So, I would say for me, it's always been that we should organize for transformation and not transaction. How do we organize for transformation, not transaction? I always tell my members and those who are willing to listen that if all we do is organize for a transaction, we're not organizing and we're not negotiating for enough. Our effort should be and always be is how our effort to fight for better wages, fight for better conditions for working people has to live within the sense of transformation, and how everything we do can lead to that sense of transformation in our society. Labor right now has a unique opportunity to make that happen. As you mentioned, the UAW strikes on Wednesday, SCIU, our healthcare workers in Kaiser, 75,000 workers went on strike to demand the stop to outsourcing for better staffing standards so we can have better healthcare and that wages can be driven up in a way that workers can be able to exist and provide for their families. So I really think in everything we do as organizers is how do we organize for transformation and not just a transaction.
Right. That's great. And so what's next? What do we need to do in the years ahead to build power for workers, public health, and the climate?
Well, I would say one is continue to work towards how do we work away from an either or type of approach and work for an and approach, right? We have to be able to find that sometimes we can't allow our differences to be the enemy of the good of what we're trying to create. I would say two is we have a very, very major election coming up next year. And we all have to be prepared for it. It is not, when President Biden says that the future of our democracy is in the balance, there's a lot of truth to that. And, and there, actually, it is very true. And we have to be ready to be able to vote next year, come in large numbers and preserve the democracy we have. But I would say it's not enough just to preserve the democracy we have. We have to improve the democracy we have and expand that democracy to everybody and ensure that in expanding that democracy, that we create a level playing field for working people in this country. For too long, we have given too much to the rich, the wealthy. This economy has been in out of balance, and that's why you've seen this summer of labor of IATSE workers, actors going out on strike, writers going on strike, healthcare workers going on strike, UAW workers going on strike, hospitality workers going out on strike. That's why you've seen all this fight that's been happening, because people are now fighting against the imbalance that has been created in the economy that doesn't meet my needs or a worker's needs. And so I really think those are the three things. How do we really come together, not focus on the either or, but the and? How do we continue to preserve our democracy, and in preserving our democracy, voting for it with that type of intensity? And then also, how do we continue to organize, not just to improve our democracy, but also making sure that we create a balance in our economy so that working people can survive.
Economic democracy.
Economic democracy. That's right. Yeah. Because far too long, the impact of I saw my father in the early 80s be displaced as a man in his middle of his life, go from a good union job to minimum wage, and how that crushed him. And it was very difficult, and it's still to this day a very emotional moment, because I remember how that had impact on myself and my family.
Yeah.
And I never want to experience that ever again. I don't want anybody to ever experience that.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we stay united.
We've got to remember, back in the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal, all the workers by the millions were in the streets demanding what they needed, and they met with the president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. What did he say to them? I agree. He said, I agree with what you're asking. Now go out and make me do it.
That's right. That's right.
No, even if they're on our side, which I think ultimately Biden is, we have to make him do it, which means that between now and next November, we have to be prepared to go into the streets in huge numbers.
That's right. And we cannot leave it up to one person alone.
Right.
To think that one person has the capacity to change something.
Yeah.
It takes all of us, and it takes our collective effort to make that happen. You know, my predecessor always used to say, don't fall in love with the politician because they'll break your heart. And we don't have to fall in love with the politician. We don't have to fall in love with Joe Biden.
Right. It's not a marriage.
It's not a marriage.
No.
And we hold him accountable at the same time as we vote for him. And so, you know, I know where I'm going to land in this election, but I'll tell you this much. I'm going to continue to fight that there be immigration reform in this country, that there be an elevated environmental standard that gets us off dirty fuel and gets us into a green economy. I'm going to continue to fight that people in this country have access to healthcare, that people have access to housing. Those are the things I'm going to fight on. And I'm going to continue to measure our leaders on how we continue to make progress in each and every one of those things, including the fact that workers should have better access to unions and make it easier for people to join unions. So I'll hold President Biden accountable to that agenda, and I'll continue to fight. But I know one thing is that he's already demonstrated now that he knows, he has a pulse of what should happen, and we just need to keep holding him accountable.
Right. Listen, David, is it okay if we take some questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Okay. Maddie, you want to tell us what the viewers want to know?
Yeah, we have some great questions rolling in. So the first question is from Ellen on Facebook, and she says, what should I know about joining a picket line? I've never done it before. What do I bring? And is it okay if I come with my kids?
You know what? First of all, I encourage the kids to be on the picket line. As a young boy, I joined my father at the Union Hall. I joined my father on the picket line, and I think it made me the person I am now because it made me really understand the value of working people when they stand together. I'd also say is that, you know, many times one of the hardest things to do is get over your fear. A lot of times we think getting on the picket line may somehow bring attention to us or may put something at risk. You know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And once we get over that fear, we're going to sit in solidarity with others and realize that the strength that we have to overcome this fear really is in our collective power. And so, yes, bring the children to join a picket line in any way you can. Even if it's at your work, know that you're protected to be able to join a picket line. You are protected by the National Labor Relations Act that gives you the First Amendment right to be able to petition. And so, you know, you're protected. It's a place that we should all be not scared of and should all join and never, like my father used to say, never cross a picket line.
Perfect. Thank you, David. So the next question, we actually got a couple of these. This one is from Sherry on YouTube. Are there labor strikes happening globally, or is this just a U.S. thing?
No, it's not a U.S. thing. It's happening in many different places. You know, in Mexico right now, there's a resurgence of labor organizing that's happening, and in Mexico, as we know, it's you know, it's been a tough time for Mexico. But right now, there's seen a resurgence in organizing because of the cross bilateral agreements that have been made and protections around workers in Mexico. And right now, there's a resurgence of independent worker movements happening right now in Mexico. That is being supported by the AFL-CIO and SCIU here in the United States and in Canada. You saw recently, and although they didn't win their victory, they sent a very loud message in France when they pushed back against the pension reform, which is not so much pension reform when you're moving the age of pension back. But yeah, I was there. I had the opportunity of being there on May 1st with those workers, and it was amazing. It was amazing to see the level of fight that the French people had in order to try to continue to preserve pension for themselves and their families. So this is not something that's unique to the United States. It's something that's happening across the country. And I think as we've seen the world shrink in the sense of how we're able to communicate with one another, we're seeing that the tactics, the strategies, and the ability for us to lift workers is happening across the world. And those strategies are now becoming binational in the sense of how we're being able to work with one another across borders.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. The
Maybe one more.
One more. Oh gosh, there's so many good ones to choose from. All right. Well, I think this one's important. From Belinda on Facebook. David, I'd love some advice. How do I start a conversation with my brother who works in the oil industry, who does not think that clean energy will bring good jobs? What do I say to him?
Well, look, I think we can already say is that right now, green energy, and if you look at just in California alone, 1 in every 4 cars that's being sold in California is an electric car. That's right now. By 2035, we're supposed to have complete transition from oil-dependent cars to electric cars. The future is transitioning now. And how do we make sure that those oil workers, because, you know, and I understand how oil workers are so dependent on their jobs. I understand that. They're concerned about how they're going to be able to continue to care for their families in an industry that is taking care of them. But our dependency on oil is making all of us very vulnerable, including the families that they're feeding. And so how do we make sure, as the green energy it starts to emerge and is establishing itself in this country, that those workers who are in the fossil industry can start making transitions with it as well, and start learning how to do the work of, you know, of green energy and the installation of green energy in and around our communities. And I really think if we all collectively understand the fear that your brother is experiencing, address that fear, reassure him that we are all going to make this transition into a better environment, and make sure that those workers who are going to be in those industries are going to be taken care of in the same way that they've been taken care of in the fossil fuel industry. We will be able to convince a lot more people, including your brother, that this transition is a good thing for all of us. It's not an either or, it's an and.
Thank you to the audience. Thank you so much for your questions. I wish we could have gotten to all of them. And a huge thanks to you, David, for joining us during this extremely exciting but very, very busy time. It's an honor to have you on the show. I hope I see you again soon on a picket line, one place or another.
I'll take you up on that, Jane. And thank you so much for having me today and allowing me to be able to talk to your audience.
Stay strong. Thanks.
Thank you.
You know, firefighters, when we fight alongside one another, shoulder to shoulder, we can win against even the most rich and powerful. And as we've seen in California, collective power means big victories that protect both workers and the communities. Ultimately, the way that we're going to stop the fires, the floods, the extreme heat, and hurricanes from worsening is by building a durable political movement for justice for workers and for our communities. And that starts with good paying union jobs, building the solutions. We know the drill, right, firefighters? To make change, we've got to take action. So what can we do? What kind of action should we take? Let's show our solidarity with striking auto workers in this critical moment. So 1, if you live near a UAW picket line, go out and join one. Bring water with you. You bring kids, bring dogs. It's kind of fun out on a picket line, actually. You get to make all kinds of new friends. And then what you're giving the workers is the knowledge that even people who aren't facing the same things they are on their jobs care about them and are willing to come out. It's a tremendous morale boost. Workers have told us it means the world to have new supporters on the picket line alongside them. And I promise you, you will be warmly welcomed. There are picket lines all over the country. So check the map linked at firedrillfridays.com/takeaction to see if there's a picket line near you. 2, if you don't live near a picket line, there's still a role for you. Workers are calling for people across the country to educate the public and show support by passing out flyers at a big 3 car dealership. That's Ford, General Motors, or Stellantis. And don't worry, there's a toolkit with everything that you need that's linked at the firedrillfridays.com/takeaction. 3, if you, for any reason, you're unable to get out in person, be sure to add your name to the petition to tell the big 3 automakers that you're all in with UAW workers. If you haven't typed it in already, this is the moment, folks. firedrillfridays.com/take action. Thank you so much, firefighters. Your support and continued action means the world. It really does. And as always, I'll see you back here next month on the first Friday. That's Friday, November 3rd. My gosh. I don't know about you, but ever since COVID, time seems to have no meaning anymore. I feel like it's still May or April. Anyway, Friday, November 3rd at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, where we'll discuss the disturbing ways that plastics could be harming your health and what you can do about it. You're not going to want to miss this. So I'll see you then. Again, November 3rd, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Stay strong, stay safe.